Hello, everyone, and welcome to Breckcast, Breckland Council's podcast, our new way of reaching our residents, our business community, and our valued partners. Throughout our podcast series, we will be exploring the work of the Council, lifting the lid on how we deliver the services you rely upon, discussing that delivery with our partner organisations across the district and further afield, and exploring the issues that matter to you. I'm Stephen McCarthy from Breckland's Communications team. Today we have a special episode. On Tuesday, 4th of March, Breckland's leader, Sam Chapman-Allen, sat down with esteemed journalist Ian Clarke of the Eastern Daily Press for a virtual town hall, a question and answer session lasting around an hour. Breckland's communications team facilitated that, in that we provided the equipment, the studio space, and we organised the live stream over Microsoft Teams. But the questions were entirely with Ian, supported by local democracy reporter Danielle Champ of the EDP. Members of the public were asked to email questions directly to Ian at the EDP to go alongside questions that Ian and Danielle had of their own. Then, using the Q&A function of Microsoft Teams, members of the public also submitted several questions live during the session. So, let's have a listen to Ian Clarke of the EDP and Breckland's leader, Councillor Sam Chapman-Allen.
Okay, good evening and welcome to Breckland Council headquarters here in Durham on this Pancake Day. I trust you've all eaten well and had either savoury or sweet, whichever your preferred one is. This is the first Breckland Council virtual town hall meeting, and with us this evening is Sam Chapman-Allen, who's the leader of Breckland Council. My name's Ian Clarke. I work for the Eastern Daily Press and have done now for nearly 37 years. I know it's hard to believe, looking I could have worked there that long. I've lived in Breckland all my life, and I now live in Durham. And basically, I'm here as an independent host, chairman, whatever phrase you want to use. And I see my role and my colleague, Danielle, who's in another room next to us, she'll be monitoring questions as they come through. And our job really is to ensure that your voice gets heard, your questions get heard. Sam and others at Breckland have put themselves forward to enable this to happen. But the thing I really want to stress is that we're completely independent of this. Sam or anybody else has had no knowledge, no sight of the questions that you've sent in. We've had lots sent in already, so thanks for those you've already sent over. And what we're going to try and do in the next hour is cover as many as we can and give you the chance to have your voice heard, Sam to answer as many as he can. Any that don't get answered this evening, I am assured that will be passed on, or once they're passed on, will be answered. So without any further ado, good evening, Sam.
Hi, Ian.
Just quickly, can you just tell us how long you've been at Breckland Council and how long you've been the leader?
Oh, crumbs. So I think I'm coming into my 7th year as being leader of Breckland Council, and I think I've been a councillor into my 4th term, so it must be some 15 years now. So I've been at Breckland.
Okay, you're not looking too hassled by it all?
No, I'm doing all right. So I think there were some comments around how old I was. So I'm 40 next year, actually. So I became a councillor quite young, had a bit of a break, and then came back. But yeah, I'm 40 next year. So yeah, big 40.
So one thing I should have said is that if you want to submit questions during the evening, there is a Q&A button on there. If you press on that and type your question in, if you have any problems, you can email Danielle, and I'll just spell out her email address, which is DANIELLE.champ @newsquest NEWSQUEST.co.uk, and your questions will then come through. And what we're going to do, we've got a screen, so I'm looking that way. We've got a screen there with questions coming in. So it'll be a mix of those that come in and those that are here on the evening. So lots of things to talk about, Sam. I think probably the most important area to start is we hear a lot about devolution. We hear a lot about local government reorganisation. So this is obviously a very live thing happening at the moment, changing every minute of every day. Can you just very briefly just explain as simply as you can, because Breckland won't exist under whatever happens. So can you just briefly explain where we're at and what is likely to happen?
Yeah, so 2 parts. One is devolution aspect, and that was a request from government to county councils to ask, did they want to be on the devolution priority programme? Ultimately, that's going to be a mayor across Norfolk and Suffolk dealing with some big strategic activities around infrastructure, education, skills, and some of those wider housing challenges we find across the locality. The secondary bit to that is local government reorganisation, where the government has said, actually, we don't think two-tier councils are overly efficient. and we want to change the structures to a single council across the whole country where districts and counties exist by the end of this Parliament. So we've got some work to do. We've got the mayoral elections taking place in May 2026 for the new strategic mayor of Norfolk and Suffolk, and we will have the new councils for Norfolk stood up anytime from May 27 onwards.
Okay.
So yeah, Breckland will cease to exist in the next 2 to 3 years.
Yep. So I know there's been talk about whether it's going to be one council, two councils, or three councils. At the moment, what do you think is the most likely? Several people have asked this sort of question.
Yeah, so across Norfolk, the population is about 1 million, and government have said ideally they would be looking for 500,000 for the new size of a council. Now, for me, that doesn't really fit. Norfolk is a really rural county, and we're proud of that rurality. We've got some fantastic market towns, a great cathedral city, and 2 fantastic historical ports of King's Lynn and Great Yarmouth. But 500 population or 500,000 makes a future council absolutely massive, or worst case, a single council for Norfolk. For me, local government has to be local. You have to be able to interact with your local councillor and your council in its entirety. And tonight is one of those examples of that ability. And I think for me, an ideal figure would be a minimum of 3 new councils moving forward, because I think that would allow a population of between sort of 350,000 to 400,000, but allowing local community to identify with their town hall, influence things which matter to them. But more important, this has to be about the residents we serve and we represent. You can have anything as far away as you like, but actually local government is local. It's got to be about the resident and how the resident needs and supports and responds to the services.
So we're assuming everyone's watching tonight who's got an interest in Breckland. So if I live in any part of Breckland, if we went for that third option, what would be like the likely geographical area that we would then be part of?
Yeah, and this is really early iteration. So we're nowhere near. I know that yesterday your paper published a very draft illustrative map of what the future could look like. As it stands, we're probably looking at Breckland amalgamating with King's Lynn and some of North Norfolk and or possibly South Norfolk to get a right type of size and geography. But that's just the view today. That may change. And of course, we've got to respond to government by the 21st of March. So it's a really tight time frame. And government may say, actually, no, we want a single council for Norfolk, or 2 or 3 or even 4. But yeah, the geography would mean that we'd most likely amalgamate with King's Lynn. But for me, local government organisation has to be about improving those services for residents. We can't continue with the status quo. And in that regard, Breckland's got the lowest council tax in Norfolk. I'm proud of that. And our neighbouring councils have a higher council tax basis. So part of the challenge for local government reorganisation is what's called council tax harmonisation. It doesn't come down, it moves up. So for the residents of Breckland, they'll be paying more in council tax. And therefore, for me, we've got to see that there is an improvement to those services for those residents.
I mean, there must have been some analysis on this. So have you got any idea what sort of amount of extra people in Breckland may be paying if there is harmonisation across an area, whether it be 3 councils, 2 councils, or 1 council?
Not yet, because it depends who you amalgamate with. The previous model has always been you go to that highest level. So for us across South Norfolk is higher than Mars and King's Lynn. But if you went for a single, it would be amalgamated and harmonised to Norwich City, which is the highest precept in from a district perspective. But it would be a vast increase. We pay £118 a year for an average bandy, which is what we have to use as our sort of metric. That would increase vastly for any change in the new structures.
Okay. But you think, just to sort of be clear on this, you think that people in Breckland are likely to be paying more whatever the outcome of devolution is?
For local government organisation, absolutely. They will be paying more in council tax as they move forward. We've got some of our councils in Norfolk have big debts. Those debts have to be administered, have to be serviced. We've still got a really ambitious programme of activity in Breckland. I want to hope that the new council commits to that. But on top of that, your question was around, will they pay more around devolution? Most likely. So part of devolution and the new mayor for Norfolk and Suffolk, they can charge a precept. They can charge a local tax base. So yeah, I think the residents of Breckland particularly will be paying more. My job over these next couple of weeks and months and years is to make sure they get an improvement for that service delivery, if that is going to be the case.
Okay. Quite a lot of people have asked whether town and parish councils will still exist, because you've said that there'll only be one rather than county and districts, that'd be one. So what about Caston Parish Council, Dereham Town Council, and that type?
So there's nothing at all saying that town and parishes are going anywhere. In fact, they do a really important job because that allows that hyper local representation for those areas and allows a voice for them, whether that's around planning or just some localized casework. And in many cases, they run those town halls, cemeteries, open spaces. They've got a really important job to do. Government are talking about neighbourhood communities and empowering councillors and communities to come together to form relevant bodies. That was announced today. Our job as we move forward is to make sure that all of those town and parish councils in Breckland understand how they can see their future. And I think actually that's part of the challenge. What's their relationship going to be like with a massive council, whether that's us and Kings Lynn, or worst case, whether that's across the whole of Norfolk?
Sure. So things like, I mean, obviously what Breckland does at the moment. So if people's bins, are they going to be collected in the same way? Do you think, when we're talking about really up for local services, do you think the way those sort of things will change? Obviously, at the moment, different councils do things in different ways. Do you think people will see tangible differences in their services?
Yeah, so we've got a really strong programme around our inspiring communities. We plough in about £1 million of discretionary funding for activities to help our most vulnerable. Our neighbouring councils within Norfolk don't do that. So the work we do with Citizens Advice, Norfolk Community Foundation, social isolation, domestic abuse, those programmes could be at risk because actually we may not be able to afford them in the new light when we amalgamate with other councils because we've got to deliver that balanced budget. In relation to bins, there'll be some waste harmonisation. We already share a waste service with Kings Lynn in North Norfolk, a really successful one. We deliver our bins on different days. So there will be some changes to that from an operational perspective, but I still believe there will be a direct change to some of the most important services we do deliver for our residents.
Just for one waste, one specific, I'm just jumping ahead of my questions there. One specific one was, are there any plans to supply Breckland residents with kitchen waste food containers as other districts in Norfolk currently do?
Yes, so the previous government announced waste reform. So it will be mandated for all councils across the country to collect food waste. We've got to commence business waste this April in 2025 and all residential properties next year. So keep a lookout for all that news coming at the end of this year when we're going to be dropping off those new food caddies. They'll be arriving and when we're going to be collecting your food waste on a weekly basis. So that will be April next year.
April 2020.
Yeah.
Okay, just over a year. So I'm sure, as I said at the outset, we haven't told you any of these questions. I'm sure you're probably laying away this morning thinking about car parking. And I'm going to come on with quite a lot of questions, as I'm sure you'd have expected. But just while we're talking about devolution, one or several of the questions were around car parks. And I have heard talk of Breckland offering the 5 towns in Breckland the chance to take over car park. I mean, is that correct?
Yes. So prior to the government announcing local government reorganisation, we were already in conversation with one of our towns around the transfer of those car parks, and that's the town of Watton.
Okay.
But subsequently, we've now written to all of our town councils to say, in light of local government reorganisation and the decision we've made to pause any future decisions around how we deliver car parking, if you would like to take over the car parks in your market towns, let's get that done as soon as practically possible so that the residents can understand how those car parks are going to be delivered within those town centres.
So if we take one of the towns, for instance, so how would that actually work? So they would then own them, would they?
So at the moment, it's really early iterations. It could either be a transfer to them in their entirety, or it may be that they wish to lease them from us for, say, £1 a year for the next 20, 30 years, whatever it is. The important bit is that the town councils are working with us to understand what the longevity of the car parks within those market towns look like. And it wasn't an easy decision to pause the car parking strategy. And I'm sure I don't want to preempt some of your questions. But when we started looking at how we deliver car parking, one of the non-statutory services, we didn't know local government reorganisation was going to be a thing. And you've read today that one of our neighbouring councils is increasing car parking fees. One of our principles, we decided as a council that if we were going to introduce car parking and charges, that we would only look at car parking fee changes once every 4 years. And we felt it would be completely inappropriate for us to deliver a change to our car parking model, introduce a charging model within the next couple of years, mindful we're disappearing in the next 2 to 3 years, and then within the new council for those car park charges to possibly change again. So we've stayed true to our principles around what has been a very tough decision to look at how we deliver car parking for the residents of Breckland.
Okay, we'll come back. We'll come back to car park in a moment. It's a question I want to take from the screen in a moment. But just on the towns taking them over, and the idea of if we had 1, 2, or 3 councils, presumably most other areas in Norfolk do charge for parking, don't they? So whether it be Norwich or whether it be North Norfolk. I mean, do you think that the likelihood is that when we go through this, whatever the process ends up, that whoever is controlling this area probably will charge the car parking?
I think it's a pretty sure certainty. If those car parks remain in the new council's area of responsibility, there is a cost attributed to that. And for us as a council, we have a low council tax base, which is good in some regards, but causes challenges in other regards. Our car parks cost a couple of £100,000 a year to deliver. That's for insurance, maintenance, everything else which goes with it. So it's not a free service. It has to be paid for. And it's the only service we've never looked at how we deliver that. We have to look at everything else with that's around how we deliver our planning service, our licensing and public protection, whatever it is. And car parking's always sat in the peripherals. So I do think the new council will have to look at harmonisation, because it would be really bizarre that in some parts of the council they charge for car parking, but in other parts they didn't. So yeah, I think it will be one of the things they'll have.
But on the town, if the towns took them over, presumably that would be down to them to look at whether they charged or didn't charge.
Yeah, it would be back down to them. And this a little bit of luxury. It's a bit mischievous of me. Town and parish councils aren't restricted to what they can charge in council tax. We as a district council are restricted. We can't increase it beyond £5 a year. Parish and town councils can charge whatever they like. And I know from the conversations I've had, they value how important free car parking is. And hopefully, if we get those transferred to those town councils, they'll be able to work out how they can financially ensure that they can remain free for the user of residents and businesses moving forward.
Okay, we will come back to it. One question that's come through on the screen is, how is Breckland going to plug with the financial black hole due to car park charges not coming on stream?
Yeah, so it's still there. So if Breckland continue to exist, you'll see in our budget process at 2027, there is a line for us expected to work out how we generate any cost recovery on car parking, but that will transfer to the new administration. So for us, we've got a balanced budget. We took it through council some 2 weeks ago. We've got an efficiency program of further savings we've got to make throughout this year and into next and into early 2027. If we continued the status quo, we would be continuing with our car park strategy, working with residents and businesses to understand how we change that strategy. But the budget gap for us exists in year 27, 28 as it moves forward. So it's still there. It's just shunted right. And we've moved some of those budgetary efficiencies around, but that'll be for the new council to inherit that wider position as we move forward.
Okay. So just on one question, when I come back, I'll come back to that one. So what one of our contributors on screen, why isn't Breckland concentrating on clearing the debt rather than spending on new projects activities?
So Breckland Council doesn't have a debt. So we are the only council in Norfolk which has no borrowing and no debt at all. The challenge is for our neighbours, both the other districts and boroughs we may amalgamate with, and the county council, there is hundreds of thousands of pounds worth of debt. So for Norfolk, it's about £800 million worth of debt, which will have to be divided up around those new councils. I've got no ability to influence the county council's finances, but as the council moves forward, we'll have to work together with whoever is in that space of the elected representatives and whoever is the new leader of that council to begin to draw down and reduce that debt, whilst ensuring they protect frontline services. So for us as Breckland, low council tax, no debt, but as we move forward, we will see an increase in council tax and we will inherit a debt.
Okay. So on the car parking issue, we've written lots about it. I'm sure you've read plenty of that, Sam. So £55,000 figure of the consultation, lots of people asked about that. Why did it cost £55,000 to ask someone to give you your view on whether or not car parking charges should be introduced in 5 relatively small market towns?
So 2 parts. One part was around the traffic survey and management fees. And we did that sort of year 23, 24 for us to understand how are our car parks used? Are they quick in and out? Are they there for a long time, overnight, etc.? And then that data and evidence was then used by the consultant who we had to bring in. We had to bring in someone who was a subject matter expert to tell us what that data meant and how we could change how we deliver car parking. And there's a cost attributed to that. And we weren't shy about that. We took that through a public committee at full council to make everyone aware that that was what we were going to be doing. And of course, when we committed to that and undertake a change to our car park strategy, we didn't know that the new government was going to introduce local government reorganisation. If we did, we would never have embarked on bringing consultants in to help the council move forward at pace around changing its car park strategy. And around the office of the officers of the council, none of them are car park subject matter experts. So yeah, we have to buy in sometimes on certain projects and activities that external resource. And this was one of those occasions. But LGR, local government organisation, came in, and therefore that's why we've paused it. But if I knew what I knew now, we wouldn't have used a consultant because we wouldn't have changed our position on car parking.
So do you think 55,000 was a reasonable sum to spend on someone preparing a report?
For two parts, because part of £50,000 is split between the traffic management survey data piece and then the consultancy piece of work. You know, as well as I do, consultants aren't cheap. You're buying in that resource for that certain project or activity. I think as we move forward to ensure that we delivered a balanced budget, that was the right thing for us to do there and then. Of course, I'd have loved to have the resources in-house, and I would have loved it if we could have paid less. But when you go out to the market to try and find somebody who's an expert to come and give you that support, there is a cost attributed to that.
Lots of people have been commenting on the idea of consultation and the idea of listening. Quite a lot of people have said, what was the point of doing consultation on car parking? Because leaving aside the decision now to pause because of LGR, you had made the decision to go ahead with parking charges. So what would be your response to the view that actually consultation is just a tick-box exercise? You do it because you have to, and ultimately you decide you want the car parking charges. So what people in our towns and villages said wasn't particularly relevant.
So 2 parts. We didn't have to consult on the model for what we were moving forward with. We had to consult on the traffic management part of it. So the council made the decision, and a difficult one, that we were going to change our car park strategy and with a serious consideration to implement charging models across the district. But we were really clear back to those principles. One was the principle we would only introduce any possible changes to the fees and charges every council cycle, every 4 years. The second part was that every market town and every car park would look different and have a different solution to whether it was charging or whether it had free for the first hour or so, free on market days. So actually we needed to undertake that consultation work with the public. Now, people may say, well, actually you haven't asked us whether you want us to charge or not. Now, I completely understand the sentiments to that. But if I asked the public, would you like to pay for car parking? I think the vast majority would have said no. And therefore, I think anecdotally, using the consultants, we already knew that question. So by saying, if the council is going to charge, what do you want that to look like in your town and this car park specifically? And that was a really meaningful piece of work. And mindful, we did that back in end of November, early December, before government announced local government reorganisation. But that consultation isn't abortive, such as the consultants' work and the data work, because if the town councils do take on the car parks, that's really valuable information, data, consultation evidence that them to understand how they can manage and run those car parks moving forward. And it will save them having to bring in a consultant. It will save them having to do consultation because they're able to use the work we've done so far.
So any work that's been done, you would make that available to others rather than saying, we did that, that's ours, you're not going to look at it.
Absolutely. It's not abortive. So we're still going to take it through our Over Scrutiny Commission. The chairman's asked that. We've committed to that. That was really important. So as you move forward, that will still be going through the scrutiny function so that members of Breckland Council and the public, because it will be streamed live and you can come and dear him in the chamber here and watch it, you can see what those responses look like across all of the market towns and on an individual basis, and whether what some of our assumptions were and some of the assumptions of the consultant were right or not. And that will absolutely be made available to those town councils if they wish to take those car parks on. And it will be for the new council, if they remain in council public ownership, and for them to use that data and evidence effectively.
True. Just on more generally, probably on public engagement, quite a lot of people have said, as I sort of intimated a little while ago, almost what was the point of it. So somebody asked us for a specific example of when consultation's been held, residents' concern have been listened to, and that's directly influenced on a decision. Can you give us an example of when that's happened?
Well, I think car parking is a prime example, and obviously it's still in early draft form, but some of the consultants' assumptions were different to ours, and our assumptions are a little bit different to what some of the residents have said. So actually what they've replied with will and would have shaped the final recommendation to the council as we move forward. So that's a prime example. But a big thing at the moment is the local plan. So the local plan is where we build all of the houses, give the planning outline allocation for all the houses you move forward. That figure's jumped up. We had a previous figure about 600. That figure's now jumped to 900. That was an imposed figure from government. We now need to work with our communities and the public for them to understand where do they think we should deliver these 900 houses. And so that's us responding directly to their feedback. That's not me in the ivory tower of Breckland Elizabeth House telling people. That'll be a bottom-up approach to the community saying, right, government are giving you a figure of 900 homes a year, Breckland Council. We want to shape that, and we'll be really responsive to where they think they should go.
New homes, we're going to come back to new homes. Okay, I'll be surprised to that. Just back on car park, someone just said, did the cabinet fully agree on car park charges?
No, there wasn't an agreement across cabinet, and actually there wasn't agreement amongst the ruling group either, because it was a big change. And we do know that when you introduce a change to car parking models, that actually it does cause disruption, and it does cause a change and for a period of time in people's behaviours of how they respond in those towns. So no, there wasn't agreement completely across cabinet and the group itself for the ruling party, but that wasn't a whipped position, and the decision was made at the start of January, and we've still got to work through that. The council continued its piece of work from a decision perspective, but of course we never got to the final mile of what the future car parking is going to look like. That will be hopefully the final decision on the agreement to transfer those car parks to the town council or lease them to the town council over a long-term tenancy.
Okay. You pause car parking. We're going to pause car parking for a moment, but we may come back to depending on what we get. What we were keen to do was to have some specific area questions and some more general stuff. We've done some general stuff. Now, Thetford, obviously, the biggest town of Breckland, and thanks to those in Thetford who are sending lots of really good questions. One particular theme that's emerged probably from the most people about the Abbey Estate, and I'll sort of summarise one question which probably is sort of summarises quite a lot of people are saying. So basically, how long are the people on Abbey going to have to wait for an announcement when the application on that redevelopment is going to be actually finalised?
Yeah, so two parts. That Flagship is the main owner of the vast majority of properties on there, has attempted to communicate really clearly of all the residents, whether they're their residents or their tenants, or whether they're owner occupiers or alike. We're still waiting for that final decision to move forward as to what that outcome's going to be. And I don't sit in the planning committee. I don't make the plan of decision. That's down to the planning committee when it gets there. And it would be inappropriate for me to give my view. My view is that if the plan application is sound and it improves the lives of those residents and the living conditions and the open space and the security and that community cohesion, that can be only a good thing. But when I met with the Residents Association and the residents of Abbey on a couple of occasions now, it's really clear that if there isn't support for this, it won't move forward. And from that perspective, if it fails at the planning committee, it can't move forward unless they appeal it. But my challenge back to them was, I've got a housing shortage across Breckland. How can you work with me using some of those derelict garage sites and alike to possibly place some homes across the Abbey Estate? And actually, they were really responsive and receptive towards that.
Someone's asked, do you think it's acceptable to make compulsory purchase residents privately owned homes on the estate? So in effect, they are saying making them homeless. Is that something that's acceptable?
So see, I haven't ever been leader exercised or requested compulsory purchase orders to be used. From speaking to colleagues, it's used very, very rarely. And actually, before a court or a judge allows CPO compulsory purchase orders to be exercised, they've got to exhaust all other avenues. And for me moving forward, actually, what you see from some of the devolution conversations is they may not sit with us at a local council level. They may be exercised by the new strategic authority. But I would hope that if any scheme across Breckland or Norfolk was moving forward, that the developer in this case, Flagship, would have worked with those residents to get the best outcome possible. And the principles they've agreed to from the Abbey Estate in particular is that if you are one of their owner occupier or one of their tenants, you're going to like for the like property, and you won't be displaced. It will be a phased approach in which they will build those new homes and then move those residents into them. For those private owner occupiers, it will be like for like homes on the estate or value of your property with a small uplift. But I absolutely understand that for those who have garages and open space in front of their homes, that some of the design work which came forward was really uncomfortable and not appropriate. And I know that they've worked really hard with Flagship. I don't think the application is perfect, but it's the outline as we're moving forward initially. But CPO powers would be a last resort and not something I'd be overly comfortable exercising.
Okay. I'm told we're halfway through, 30 minutes in, 30 minutes to go. So we are getting through the question pretty well. I'm going to do a few on Dereham, okay, and then a few more sort of general themes which probably relate to a lot of towns. So in terms of Dereham, lots and lots of questions. Traffic, you won't be surprised, has cropped up, and actually probably more from Dereham than anywhere. The number of houses that are being built and the impact on roads. I mean, people talked about the new Lidl store that's going to be built and that whole Tavern Lane area, and we just outside the office near the Tesco roundabout, just the impact on roads of more and more houses. So people are saying, why do authorities like Breckland keep allowing more houses to be built when the roads are clogged, you can't get a doctor's appointment, the schools are filling up, etc., etc. So why are more houses continually being given rubber stamp by the planning committee?
So I guess there's two parts to that. One, we have a housing target which we have to achieve. Now, previously that was agreed locally by the district council. They set that through what they thought was the needs moving forward over the life of what was called a local plan. The new government's come in and we've now got an imposed figure. So as I said previously, Breckland's figure in July 2024, we thought we need about 600 homes a year to be built across the whole district. Every year. Now that figure's jumped some 45% up to 903 homes a year Breckland will need to build out to meet its housing need. And that's a figure set by government. So in the likes of Dereham, which has its challenges, particularly around transport, we're not the transport authority. So when we go to the planning committee and a planning decision, we rely on Norfolk County Council Highways to make an assessment to whether this application will impact adversely the existing highways or cause any safety concerns. And therefore, that application has to put in mitigations if it does. The same for flooding. We're not the lead flood authority. It's up to Norfolk County Council, the lead flood authority, to decide whether this application will impact that new houses or anybody else up or downstream by building them as they move forward. The challenge for us is 900 homes a year. That's a target of about 17,000 over the life of our plan. That's a lot of homes. That's a lot of homes in a rural locality with 5 fantastic market towns. And if you look at the likes of Thetford and Attleborough, they already have what we call urban extensions of 5,000 homes being built there. So we've got to work with our residents. One of your questions earlier of how do you respond to consultation? We've got to work with our residents and our parish and town councils to say, this is the challenge government has set us. Where can we build homes across the district in the right place, but also sometimes the right scale of development to be able to get an improvement to a doctor's surgery or a road network or deliver a new school or an expansion to a school? Because for those areas, you have to have the right number of homes to get the money coming in from the developer. There is no perfect solution. And what we're trying to do is plan the best we can whilst not adversely impacting those existing communities.
Yeah. Just even off that, I mean, one other theme is why aren't developers asked for more in terms of contributions to play areas, to give money to local surgeries so they can employ more doctors, to allow more to be done in the communities? Why isn't the planning committee more like, if you want to build 50 homes and make loads of money, why you need to give us more in return? Why isn't it one only tough on them?
Yeah, so those statutory consultees, and we'll pick up Norfolk County Council around education. They will work with the developer through the Section 106 to say, actually, we think an appropriate level for you to transfer across to us is 100,000, 200,000, and whatever it is, because we need to expand the school or deliver a new school, or the same for a new GP surgery expansion. That will be for the local NHS trust to say, actually, what is the mitigation required to expand the surgery because we're at capacity, and we need some more consultation rooms, or we need a new footpath, whatever it is, through what's called the Section 106 agreement. That will be agreed between the applicant and those statutory consultees on Norfolk County Council, the Health Authority, the police, and us as the district council around open spaces and play parks, all the parish councils, to make sure that that development isn't impacting the existing community and is enhancing it as it moves forward. But it is a challenge. There is no perfect solution to this. And what we're finding across not just Breckland, but the country is we need further infrastructure and investment. And that's not forthcoming from central government. It can't be forthcoming from ourselves as the district or the county, because, as you said earlier, we haven't got that type of money. So it has to come from the developer. And the developer needs to understand, how do they make a profit, whilst we as the local authority, from a planning perspective, ensure that they're delivering the right homes at the right size and scale, whilst we're making sure our statutory consultees engage really meaningfully to ask what they need to do to ensure that, as I said, we're not impacting adversely those existing communities and enhancing those service provisions.
Several people were talking about the state of Durham Town Centre, the general state of it, some of the shops looking shabby, empty shops and that type of stuff. One particular issue is around the older cash, which I know there's been a lot of that. So why is there still rumbling on? Why hasn't there been tough action to actually impose improvements or a takeover of that building from the owner? Why hasn't that happened?
So it gets a bit like your compulsory purchase order question. As soon as you step into the space of wanting to exercise any legal power, we've got to prove that we've done everything prior to that to work with that landlord, in this case, a landlord for that property. It was really difficult to find out who the owner of that property was. And there were some complications around who had ownership and whether that was between a couple of individuals and some financial establishments. And we've undertaken that action. We've taken the required legal action, and it was a protracted period. And I can only apologise to the residents of Deer who found it really frustrating. But we're a big district, some 500 square miles, 5 market towns, and I've only got 2 enforcement officers across the whole of the locality. And for them to focus on this, which they have done, it's been really intensive. So we've undertaken some of that work. People who have seen some of that remedial work has already commenced, and the charge has been placed against the building for those works. It will be a long process. It's not going to be resolved overnight, but hopefully people of Dean will begin to see that building improve over these coming months.
Any indication how long it's going to take?
No, I haven't. And I don't want to commit to and give false hope. But we're at the final position from a process position now, and we've done that. So we're now able to do the required works and place the charge against it. And it's not going to be brought back into use by us, but we're going to be able to bring it to hopefully one, safe, but more aesthetically pleasing for the high street. But you've seen previously the other government announcing high street auctions, which allows people to buy or rent a property on the high street, which is in owner occupier or has been vacant for a long time. Part of the challenge is, how do we ensure that that's a habitable building and allows that to go to rental auction if the current landlord isn't wishing to market it appropriately?
Okay. One specific for Deerham, but I know it relates to others, is the number of houses of multiple occupation and hostel accommodation springing up, places that are being used to house people that will be homes, and the sort of the antisocial behaviour and those types of things around it. I mean, is that something that is a Breckland responsibility to house people in those types of places?
Yes. So HMO, house of multiple occupancy, it has to be registered with us. So we will, as the local housing authority, go out and make sure that it meets the requirements of safety standards and everything else. For us, we own properties across the district, which we place people in who find themselves either in hardship, homeless, or are living rough. Now they come from all walks of life, and I hope that people don't traditionally think that these are people who are vagrants or anything else. They're not. Every one of us is only 1 month away from possibly being made homeless by not being able to make our mortgage repayments or our rental payments. And from that perspective, so we have all walks of life who we're supporting those properties. Like anything, whether you are living in one of our homes or a private home, there may be antisocial behaviour. We've got a community safety team. If antisocial behaviour is taking place, please report it to us. We've got embedded police officers from Norfolk Police with our community safety team. And that's the type of thing we do on a day-to-day basis to try and ensure that doesn't take place. And when it does, we do our best to try and remove the challenge if we can't mitigate it, but people shouldn't have to put up with antisocial behaviour.
Sweet. One question has come through on the screen about Shop Abbey. Freedom of information requests have shown that the Shop Abbey was a failure in supporting businesses. Do you regret investing so much in that project?
So Shop Happy was a scheme which was took place in Yorkshire, and some other councils in Norfolk decided to pick it up and try and run with it. Was it the right thing to do? I think it was, Ian, because we needed to try something different to ensure that our high streets could go from strength to strength. And it proved to be a success in other parts of the country. And we tried our best as the local authority to help those high street businesses. Did it survive contact with the ground? It didn't. And for that, I'm sorry that it didn't, because actually those businesses who signed up to it were really hopeful that actually it was going to be able to bring their business online, where they just didn't have the capacity to do that and allow their goods and commodities to be sold, picked up, and everything else. But that was all part of our high street initiative. And actually we've seen real success across our market towns in some other areas, in Thetford, around the work we've done through the Riverside Regeneration, direct investment from the council, bringing in a national gym, a national hotel, and a local boutique cinema, to the work we're doing in Watton around the digital hub, supporting the business case with the Wayland Chamber of Commerce to bring what will be a fantastic facility. And of course, most recently, Swaffham with the Heritage Action Zone, getting millions of pounds into that town itself. So some schemes we try and they're not successful. But I think it's right and proper that we try things to ensure that our town centres and our high streets can go from strength to strength. And actually, we've had some great successes in other areas.
Sam, I'm sure as you were laying awake last night thinking about what you're going to ask, I'm sure there were two words that will probably ring around in your brain. One is Barnum and one is Bree. I remember as a reporter being in this building when it first came about that the council was going to buy it, which was a lot of years ago now. And lots of people, I'm sure you'd have expected, have asked about this. Just for those that are not absolutely up to date, can you just briefly fill us in with where we are now in terms of that complex?
Yeah, so just try and give it a context. So as a council, we owned commercial assets across the county, which gives us a revenue income. And that revenue income provides and supports our frontline service. And we get a lot from that. We get a couple of £1 million, which ensures we can protect those frontline services, but also keep council tax low. If we sell a capital asset, I can't use that cash to deliver a service because the government doesn't allow me to do that. I can only buy other capital type assets, whether that's a waste truck or hardware or another commercial asset. In relation to Barnum Brooms, we've had it for 19 years, and we purchased it for 6.9 million to ensure that we were able to get a continuous revenue stream into the council to provide those services we mentioned. And actually, it's done really well. It has provided a rental income year on year on year. Like anything across our portfolio, anybody can approach us, whether that's the tenant or anybody else, to say, is that asset for sale? And the council was approached and it made the decision to begin to dispose of Barnum Broom itself. We're still in those negotiations. And just like if you're selling your house, you wouldn't want everybody else to know what that agreed sale price was. And we're in those final iterations. And I wish tonight that I could tell you what that.
I think you're going to give us some breaking news.
That agreed price. But I'm clear to the position. And I know some people tonight will be skeptical around my response. But as soon as we have sold it, and if we do sell it, I will make that information public. We'll take it through the relevant committee. I met with some residents, particularly in Dereham, who had some real concerns about it. I made that commitment to them as well. But I just want to reassure people that whilst we still maintain and own that asset, it is given a strong revenue return to the council, like the rest of our portfolio. And that cash back into the council is ensuring we can protect frontline services. But some of the figures which have been floated around via the EDP and others around it being sold for £1, £2, £3 million is just completely inaccurate. It isn't that price at all.
So how much broadly has it made over the years? You said it's been a good investment. I mean, how much has it made the council?
So it's a couple of £1 million. So over the life of the asset, it's a couple of £1 million. And once we do sell it, we'll be able to present what we purchased it for, what we sold it for, and what we've got in through the life of the asset.
So those figures you can say they will be published once the deal.
Absolutely. And we don't historically do that because commercial activity takes place day in, day out for the council. We've got lots of assets we dispose of or acquire as needed. But I know that this asset has had such interest from the public. And I think some of that is because there's been a lot of misinformation. And I want to reassure the public that whilst I'm leader and my fellow councillors and the officers of the council have done everything and it has been right and proper, and to reassure them that when they see the facts and figures, actually it was the right thing, one, to buy Barnum Broom, and once it's been sold, the sale price was right, and over the life of the asset, that it's returned a good profit to the council on behalf of the residents of Breckland.
Do you think it's because it was a golf club, leisure club, whatever you want to call it? Do you think it's because it was that it's had more interest from people than if it had been something less obvious as a thing?
I think so, and it's probably one of our most expensive assets we've acquired over the life of our commercial property portfolio. Some 6.9 million. That's a large amount, but also I think some of the confusion from the public perspective, because quite rightly they'll say, Sam, why don't you spend that 6.9 million on delivering a service or building and providing much needed support for the vulnerable residents across the district? And we just can't do that because it's a capital piece of cash. So what we've got to do is we've got to invest that capital, which we're doing, to ensure that we get the revenue income to protect and provide and support those services. And hopefully, if it is sold, we'll be able to present and update a really transparent position on that. If, in the deal falls through and it doesn't go forward, we'll retain it. We'll retain the asset and we'll keep that commercial income coming in.
And in terms, we've talked about assets that will or won't still be in ownership once LGR happens, if it does. So as an example, is that the sort of thing that would then be transferred to a new council, or would it have to be, how would that sort of thing work?
Yeah, so when the reorganisation has taken place in other parts of the country, those assets have moved to the new council in its entirety, because some of the modelling which government does is it looks at what we get from council tax, what we get from our commercial assets, and that's where they understand the financial stability of those local councils as they move forward. So most likely, those assets will move into the new council as they move forward over the next 2 to 3 years as Breckland ceases to exist.
And lots of people, just on Barnum Broom, lots of people have asked about the transparency with what's been spent. The Freedom of Information Commissioner ruled the council should release information, and yet the council spent £15,000 on challenge the ruling. So why has there been so much effort and money spent to make sure that some of those figures hadn't been made public?
So the ICO ruled that we need to make that information public. We disagree with that, and we sought legal advice. We then took it through the courts. The legal system agreed with our position that needed to be commercially confidential and that the ICO was wrong in their ruling. And I think that's important, not just for the council, but more importantly, the tenants and the owner-occupiers who we have across our portfolio. Because we need that asset to work in a really commercial way. One, so that me and my fellow councillors aren't lobbied to say, actually, we need a rent reduction on this asset, or why is this commercial asset paying less than this one? That needs to be a commercially confidential agreement between the tenants and the council's commercial team. And once it comes forward for any sale, for any asset we acquire or sell, that's public information, that's public record. So the ICO was wrong. The judge ruled that they were wrong, and that's why we wanted to uphold what we believe was our principle. Because if we had been wrong and the judge had said, no, Breckland, you are wrong, then we would have held our hands up, and I would have absolutely apologised for wasting public money on a legal challenge, and we would have had to change our whole stance on how we respond to questions from the public and councillors around our commercial activity. But we weren't, and the judge supported our position and our view.
So if we turn the clock back 19 years and you were leader at that time and the idea of buying Barnum Broom was coming up now, would you still do what was done at the time?
So in hindsight today, sat here with you, I wouldn't. Why? Because I think your question probably was correct, but actually it created a lot of questions and challenge because it was a golf and country club. And we don't run a golf and country club. We run an asset, but the perception is absolutely there. But we need to move really quickly. I think the second part is we probably wouldn't buy such a big asset. We would probably diversify that in a couple of smaller ones to ensure that we kept that revenue income. So when we do sell Barn and Broom, that would be a big reduction in our annual revenue from our commercial property portfolio. If we had smaller assets, we can hopefully smooth that out as we move forward. So it was the right decision then, because actually it's given a good commercial return over the life of the asset. And I'm not going to dispute that. In fact, I'll defend that. But in light of sat here now, because of how much interest it's generated, and I think it is because it's a golf and country club, I probably wouldn't be supportive of buying such a similar asset.
Thank you. We've had a few questions about care of elderly in Breckland. One particular one was, why isn't Breckland helping more elderly people who lost their winter fuel allowance last year? I understand some councils have either provided funding or certainly been more active in making people aware where they can get money. How would you respond to that sort of issue?
So I think that if people are in that position where they don't think we're doing anything, please do contact us, because actually that's not true. So over the last couple of months, we've had Breckland winter fuel hardship bags, which have gone out to numerous charities across the district. We've provided a really useful lifeline for residents across the district. Beyond that, we've got 2 dedicated money advice workers who we pay Norfolk Citizens Advice Bureau to deliver. So they're independent from us, because sometimes we do get things wrong. And they're able to offer money debt advice to anybody across the district from that perspective. On top of that, we've got the household support fund. So anybody who have made contact with the council who found themselves in hardship, we were able to provide money to them. And it's up to them what they do with that money. But predominantly for those who found themselves losing their winter fuel, they were using that to pay their electricity, gas, coal, oil bill over that winter period. But let's be clear, we didn't expect the winter fuel to be cut so quickly. But actually, we've got a really dedicated communities team. We spoke about it earlier. That's a discretionary service for us. And they've done fantastic work with organisations. I know that you're involved with a local charity of Inderham, worked with yours, but so many, along with our food hardship pantry scheme, which we've got that scheme which goes across our villages. And those officers are there providing that needed support for anybody. But likewise tonight, if someone's impacted by the winter fuel and or any hardship at all, please do get in contact with us.
Thank you. Several of the questions, and I have mentioned this, that were quite specific to issues within Breckland, and it probably wouldn't be right tonight to really go into these on those. They're probably ones that need to be sent to a caseworker. But just really want to reassure people that they are going to be passed on, and that I think you would agree that they will be dealt with. So if anybody watching thinks I've asked about a particular issue that has been dealt with, it will be. One I'm briefly going to touch on, because it's been a bigger one in the village, is at Griston, where the heavy industry operation is the talk about that being sited in Griston. A lot of concern about that, and in general terms, the questions from those people there was why, in their view, they feel they're not being listened to in terms of the impact of that operation in their village.
Yeah, so there was a previous employment and commercial activity there that then went, and most recently a new company has gone into there. We've seen that go through the relevant planning process, and as I said, I'm independent from that. I'm not part of the planning process itself, and we've tried really hard to work with the applicants, but also the community, to try and do as much possible mitigation as possible. Now, planning is really emotive. In some regards, you're going to frustrate and anger 50% of those who are interested in that application, and please the other 50%. These numbers may differ depending on how many, and it won't always be perfect. But what I would say to Griston and any community, I'm more than happy to come and meet with them and officers, not just of the parish council, but a wider community, to respond to the questions and concerns they've got. And I won't have all the answers, and I won't be able to solve all their problems for them, but I absolutely will be able to understand where they're coming from and try learn from that, so that if they've got challenges where we probably haven't done what we should have done, that the council learns from that. We don't make similar mistakes across other parts of the district.
Okay. back to devolution, one of the questions that comes on the screen, there's been a lot of negative publicity around devolution, and this person is asked, surely there must be some benefits. How would you?
So I think there are benefits to devolution, because there will be someone across Norfolk and Suffolk who the residents of Norfolk and Suffolk, you and I and others, have been able to elect as our mayor of that authority. I think there are some challenges still for me though, because it's not real meaningful devolution, it's decentralisation. Ultimately, it's just powers and that money moving from Whitehall over to Norfolk and Suffolk. Where actually, if you want real change and real meaningful devolution, they need complete flexibilities and freedoms to do what they need to do to deal with some of the challenges, whether it is around the dualling of the A47 in its entirety, whether that is around the Ely Junction, whether that's around building new primary care doctor surgeries or this wider school expansion scheme. That's not going to sit with them. We're still going to have to revert back to central government and Whitehall for those type of responses. There will be some positives to devolution, I think, around that accountability and that vision setting, but it's really early on. And it's our job as councillors and the public to make sure through the consultation process, which is live at the moment, that we get the best type of outcome and we are able to deliver what the priority programme is, which we shape as the residents of Breckland and Norfolk.
So just thinking about people out there who are listening and maybe catching up afterwards, are we going to have a say on which option is agreed for Norfolk / Breckland / our area?
So it's interesting. No. So devolution consultations open at the moment. It's not being delivered by ourselves at Breckland or Norfolk County Council. It's being run by central government, and they'll respond to that. Most likely they will adopt a devolution Norfolk and Suffolk mayor. In regards to local government reorganisation, where there's been previous restructures, the vast majority of the public has said, I'm really happy with the services I'm provided. I don't think we need to change. And that's what the response and consultation have showed. They've still gone forward, and local government reorganisation and restructuring has still happened. So as much as people may say they don't want it, I think sadly it will happen anyway. The important part though is if the consultation happens either from government or from what we do, it will shape what they want their services to look like and where we think we can improve those services. And that's why I said at the start, local government reorganisation has to be bottom up and the residents have to be front and centre.
Yeah, okay. We are getting towards the end. One has just come through. Many people feel the council has wasted money on projects that have not benefited the district, i.e. 180,000 on two failed apps. Is this the value for money you've mentioned? These are the questions just come through.
So I think we spoke about it earlier, and you asked about Shop Abbey and Breckworld. Shop Abbey, it had successes in other parts of the country. It was the right thing for us to do to try and ensure that all of our town centres had the opportunity to increase their footfall and their productivity. And as I said, lots of businesses were really supportive of that piece of work. And no different from Shop Abbey, the vision was there, and actually the piece of software which was designed was really exciting and innovative. But sadly, it just got launched at the wrong time, just as the pandemic was happening. So I don't think it was a waste, but actually some of that thing from Shop Abbey or Breckworld has fed into some of those wider activities I spoke about, particularly the Heritage Action Zone in Swaffham, where we've got millions of pounds within that town to see that regeneration go from strength to strength. Have they been perfect? No, they haven't. Have we made mistakes? I think we've learned from some of the errors, but I don't think it was the wrong thing to do for us to try and innovate and try and do something different, because the status quo just wasn't working and the high streets were struggling. So it was the right thing for us to do with 5 very different, unique market towns, to try something different, to try and allow them to go from strength to strength.
Yeah, okay. Well, believe it or not, the clock has ticked round to almost exactly an hour. Just in summary, first of all, thanks for all those people that submitted questions beforehand. My inbox was pinging very heartily all week. And all those questions, if your question hasn't been answered tonight, or asked tonight and answered tonight, I do apologise. We will pass them on, and you are agree they will be looked at and responded to?
Yeah, absolutely. And if you've emailed in and you haven't provided your address or the relevant mobile phone number, please do, because that's what we need to do to follow up to make sure we're able to respond to that.
And obviously, this is the first virtual town hall that's been done. And just briefly, what would you say about sort of future consultation, openness, transparency? What would you say about what you want to do taking this forward?
So I think we've tried to do everything we can to be as open and transparent as possible. I used to move my cabinet meetings around all 5 of our market towns and allow public questions well in advance from that perspective. They sadly started off really well, but began to peter out towards the end. And so we decided to probably knock them on the head. We did our parish and town council engagement back in August, September, and got some really good engagement across those localities. But they're quite intensive. So I think when we last spoke, I set you the challenge to say, actually, how would you feel about holding me to account with this type of session, which you control the narrative, the questions, and I just respond to them. Transparency is really important to me, but more importantly around Breckland Council and democracy in its entirety. Anybody can attend any of our meetings. You can either watch them online or come to the committee itself. Every day you can drop me an email and I will respond to that if it's around relevant case, but also you've got your local councillors. And if you've got any questions which you want raising publicly, they can do that through the relevant committee, but also full council allows for any member of the council to ask a question of me and my cabinet on any matter. So please, if you've got questions, raise them with your local councillor as well.
So many thanks for your time and your openness and answering all the questions you've got. Thanks for joining. If you haven't had your pancake yet, I am slightly obsessed with food, so I'm going to mention pancakes again. Please enjoy it. And one shameless plug from me, if you want to see the maps of the 3 suggested LGR options, tomorrow's Eastern Daily Press is a very good newspaper to buy, and we're actually printing all 3 of them, so you can see where the outlines of those maps would be, and obviously that the whole debate around it is something that you're obviously interested in, and as an organisation, something as a newspaper, we're really keen on it, and transparency, democracy, open democracy is something that we're really keen on, which is why we've been involved. So Sam, thank you.
Thank you.
And thanks everyone for joining in. Thank you.
Well, everyone, you have been listening to Ian Clarke of the Eastern Daily Press in a virtual town hall Q&A with Breckland's leader, Sam Chapman-Allen. Thank you for listening to our latest Breckcast. Keep an eye on our website, our social media, and the usual podcast outlets for future episodes. I've been your host, Stephen McCarthy from Breckland's communications team. Thank you so much for listening.